The moment he laid eyes on her, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, an intoxicating rush of excitement, danger, and desire. She was everything his wife wasn't: wild, mysterious, and irresistibly forbidden. He told himself it was just a harmless distraction, a secret thrill that would never come to light. But affairs have a way of unraveling lives, and his was no exception. At first, she seemed perfect, too perfect. She knew exactly what to say, how to make him feel alive again. The way she looked at him, the way she made him forget his responsibilities, it was as if she had stepped right out of his fantasies. So, when it all came crashing down, when his wife found out and walked away, he convinced himself it was worth it. He had chosen passion over routine, excitement over loyalty. But passion has a price. And soon, he began to see the cracks in her perfect facade. Strange things started happening. Small, unsettling coincidences. The way she always knew where he was, even when he hadn't told her. The stories she told about her past, details that didn't quite add up. Then the real fear set in when he found something hidden in her apartment, something that made his blood run cold. Now, trapped in a nightmare of his own making, he realizes he's made a terrible mistake. But some mistakes can't be undone. And the woman he thought he wanted? She has a secret so dark, so dangerous, that by the time he uncovers the truth, it might already be too late. The first time he noticed something was off, he brushed it aside. A misplaced object here, a cryptic comment there, things that, on their own, didn't seem like much. But as time passed, those small moments turned into something darker. She never talked about her past in detail, always changing the subject or laughing it off. "Nothing worth mentioning," she'd say with a flick of her wrist, her eyes flashing with something he couldn't quite read. He told himself it didn't matter. The past was the past, and he was living in the present, his new life, his new love. But when he found the first note, scrawled in shaky handwriting and slipped under his apartment door, the uneasy feeling in his stomach became impossible to ignore. "You don't know who she really is." The words sent a chill down his spine. He tried to convince himself it was a joke, some petty attempt by his ex-wife to shake him. But deep down, he knew she wasn't the type. And when he brought it up to his new lover, her reaction only made things worse. She didn't seem surprised. She didn't ask who could have sent it. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with an expression he'd never seen before. "And do you?" she asked. "Do you really want to know who I am?" The question haunted him. He had thought he knew. But now, as the days passed, he started to realize how little he actually did. She never spoke about family. Never mentioned old friends. When he asked why she never introduced him to anyone from her life before him, she would just smile. "You're all that matters now," she'd whisper. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now it felt like a warning. The tension between them grew, invisible but suffocating. He started noticing other things: how she always had an answer, no matter the question. How her mood could change in an instant, from warmth to ice with no warning. How, sometimes, he'd catch her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression unreadable. Then one night, he woke up to find her standing by the window, motionless. The soft glow of the streetlights outlined her silhouette, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. For a moment, he thought she was asleep, dreaming with her eyes open. But then she whispered something. A name. One he didn't recognize. He sat up slowly. "Who?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She turned to him, her face unreadable. "Go back to sleep," she murmured. "You don't need to worry about it." But he did. He couldn't stop thinking about it. The name, the note, the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. So he did what he never thought he would. He started digging. The first search led nowhere. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air, with no trace of the life she had supposedly left behind. No old addresses, no job history before the one she claimed. But then, late one night, he stumbled upon an old news article buried deep in the archives. The headline made his breath catch in his throat. A house fire. 2 victims. and one missing person last seen leaving the scene. A woman whose description matched hers exactly. His blood ran cold. The next morning, he confronted her. He didn't show her the article, didn't mention the name. He just asked, once again, about her past. This time, her smile was slow, deliberate. "Why are you so curious all of a sudden?" she asked, tilting her head. "I thought you loved me for who I am now." His stomach twisted. "I do," he said carefully. "But everyone has a past." Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes darkened. "Some things are better left buried," she whispered. That night, he lay awake beside her, feeling like a stranger in his own bed. The woman he had risked everything for his marriage, his reputation, his entire life wasn't who she had claimed to be. And the worst part? He had no idea how dangerous she really was. Then, as he finally drifted into uneasy sleep, his phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number. "Get out while you still can." His heart pounded as he stared at the glowing screen, the message burning into his mind. "Get out while you still can." His first instinct was to wake her up, demand answers, force her to tell him what he'd gotten himself into. But something held him back, the chilling realization that if this warning was real, he might not like the truth. Lying in the dark beside her, he could feel the warmth of her body, the slow, steady rise and fall of her breath. Just days ago, he would have reached for her, comforted by her presence. Now, all he felt was fear. Sleep was impossible. His thoughts raced as he tried to piece everything together. The fire, the missing person, the name she had whispered in the dark, none of it made sense. Who was she? Who had sent the warning? And more importantly, how had he let himself get pulled so deep into something he didn't understand? By morning, he had made up his mind. He needed to leave. He needed to walk away before it was too late. But then she opened her eyes. The second she looked at him, he knew she sensed it, the shift in him, the doubt, the fear. She sat up slowly, tilting her head as she studied his face. "You're acting different," she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. He forced a chuckle, shaking his head. "Just tired." She didn't look convinced. Tired or something else? His pulse quickened. He had to be careful. "Just tired," he repeated. "Didn't sleep well." For a moment, she just watched him. Then, with a soft sigh, she reached for him, tracing slow circles on his wrist with her fingertip. "Maybe I can help with that," she whispered. A chill ran down his spine. There had been a time when he would have melted under her touch. But now it felt like a trap. That afternoon, while she was in the shower, he grabbed his phone and called the number that had sent the message. His hands were shaking. It rang once, twice, then click. Silence. "Hello," he whispered. A breath on the other end. Then a voice, low and urgent. "She's dangerous. You need to leave." His grip tightened on the phone. "Who are you?" "I don't have time to explain." The voice was rushed, panicked. "She's not who she says she is." "You think you chose her?" "No. She chose you." A cold sweat broke out on his skin. "What do you mean?" But before he could get an answer, the line went dead. He stood there, heart hammering, staring at the phone in his hand. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. He had spent months believing he was in control, believing he was the one making decisions. But now doubt crept in like a slow poison. That night, he planned to leave. He packed a small bag, just the essentials: his wallet, his keys, his phone. He would figure out the rest later. But as he was slipping on his jacket, he heard her voice behind him. "Going somewhere?" His breath caught. He turned slowly to find her standing in the doorway, arms crossed. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't pretending anymore. He swallowed hard. I just needed some air." She stepped closer. "Liar!" His stomach twisted. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing himself to sound calm. "Why are you acting like this?" Her eyes darkened. "I should be asking you that." The room was too quiet. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. Then, she sighed, shaking her head. I thought you were different. A cold wave of dread washed over him. You chose me, she continued, stepping closer. You wanted me. But now you're scared. Just like the others. His pulse thundered in his ears. The others? She smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. You think you were the first? He felt sick. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what she was saying. What? What happened to them? She tilted her head. They left. A pause. Or at least, they tried to. His blood turned to ice. He needed to get out. Now, but before he could take a step, she spoke again. You looked me up, didn't you? Her voice was almost amused. You think you know the truth? He didn't answer. He couldn't. She sighed, almost disappointed. You men are all the same. You chase excitement, but the moment things get too real, you run. He clenched his fists. I just want to leave. She studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she stepped aside. Go then. His breath caught. He didn't trust her. He didn't trust this. But he had no choice. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped past her, feeling her eyes on him the whole time.